I'm Jim Czek,
And I'm Renee Merrifield.
and we're here with Beyond the Ballot. Missed opportunities in Canada being highlighted by those Trump deals. And obviously, that deal in Europe was massive. Even all the left-leaning outlets in the United States were saying congratulations to the Trump administration. That's a big deal, that deal.
Absolutely. And Jim, you and I talked about this. I think it was way back right when Carney was first elected. And we said the worst thing that could happen for Canada is that we are the last one to actually make a deal. A lot of the economists were saying that Carney was the best choice to go and make a deal with Trump. But right now, I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing that at all. We are almost dead last in terms of getting a deal done. And I think that time is running out.
Yeah, that pivot, when Carney said we're going to pivot to the European Union, we're going to get all our deals there, and it's going to be great, and we're going to lock the U.S. out of this deal, and all of a sudden, the Americans just basically took our deal from 2 years ago when the Germans came here begging for LNG, and we said no business case. Japanese came here begging for LNG, and also Trump did a deal with them for LNG. So he took both our deals, and this one here is worth $750 billion. $750 billion, and because we said that we would sell them hydrogen, and why are the Europeans buying LNG if they have all this hydrogen coming from Canada?
Yeah, Trump is a master negotiator, and when Japan went, that was worth $1 trillion, and this new deal, $750 billion. I mean, think about the prosperity that is absolutely hemorrhaging away from Canada and going to the U.S. It's absolutely a tragedy, and signals that our government just does not have its act together yet.
Yeah, and the other bad thing about this is he's made the deal with Japan, and he's made the deal with the European Union for LNG. That means even if we decided today we want to sell our LNG, he's taken away two customers that came to us first 2 years ago.
Yeah, and the other thing that he's also done is, did he not make a deal with Ukraine for the rare earth minerals as well?
Yep,
So,
yep, yep.
I mean, we're losing out on all fronts, and we are the next door neighbor. We saw what happened the first time around with the U.S. CMA agreement, in which the U.S. went and Trump went to Mexico and negotiated that deal first, and then Canada was left with the leftovers. This is happening all over again. I don't know what Canada is going to do, but not only is it the leftovers from the U.S., but it's also the leftovers from the rest of the world. Japan won't need our LNG. The EU won't need our LNG. So, now we're actually getting iced out of the only resources that we actually have. And I think this is a very, very dangerous and precarious situation to put the Canadian economy in, not even short term, long term.
Yeah, one of the big things that even, like I said, the left media in the United States, CNNs and the MSNBCs and that were saying, is they're actually coming around and saying that, one of the things that the stark contrast between the Biden administration and Trump's administration is a display of strength. And I'm sure you can remember that Joe Biden was wandering around in the field there in Europe the last time I think he was in Europe. And then Trump sitting there with Ursula. I mean, it was obviously where the strength was. And then the same thing with Keir Starmer. I mean, Keir Starmer could do not much but stammer as Trump highlighted all the weaknesses, and then he even called out his London mayor and all that stuff. And just a display of American strength. And again, the military. They invested so much into that military, and everybody else kind of let their military go. And that stick is so much more powerful now with what the Russia-Ukraine war going on.
Yeah, and love him, hate him, Trump is powerful. And the reason that Trump is powerful is because he is a bully, and he is, very focused on what he wants to get and on what he wants to get for the American people and on what his success criteria looks like. And the reality is, I mean, if you recall what it feels like to be on a school playground, the bullies are popular. The bullies are not ostracized. The bullies are not the ones that are left out, when recess is called. The bullies are the ones that everyone wants to be around. And the reality is that right now he's holding all of the cards, and he's got the poker chips right now that everyone wants to be doing business with and playing against.
Yeah, Trump 2.0 is a completely different beast than Trump 1.0 because that Trump was I guess much more spiteful, hateful, reactionary, and like I think I guess like too much about himself and maybe the people he surrounded with himself because he was very reactionary and very emotional. And this time it's just strong, focused, kind of like, and he knows he has the strength this time.
Look, Trump 1.0 wasn't ready to lead. They were not ready to govern. He was so flat-footed. He was so on his back foot. He did not start in the same way. This Trump 2.0 has had 8 years, 4 in office, 4 not in office, to get ready for this exact moment of strike. And don't for one second kid yourself that he hasn't been preparing for this moment and thinking, he's arrogant enough or confident enough, whichever side you want to put him on, to believe that he was going to be back in office and that he literally needed to be ready for that day. So what we saw in this one is the moment that he took office. The moment that he started working on the campaign front, he was telegraphing exactly what he was going to do, how he was going to do it, and where he was going to do it. And the fact that Canada did not respond, did not have a plan of attack, did not have a plan of counterattack, and I'm not talking about the like elbows up kind of like we're going to give counter tariffs and hurt our people. Like, no, I'm not talking about that sort of weak counterattack. We have had 8 years to prepare ourselves with different trade relationships and have squandered that warning sign across our bow, and now we are literally being toyed with the lion that's in the pen.
And the other stark contrast in Trump 2.0, he's surrounded himself with some of the best in the world. Like some of the people around him are like what makes him look really good. These are really strong, technical people in their fields, and they're very successful people, a lot of them as well. I guess a little bit different down there. They get to appoint different people as opposed to they're not necessarily elected people in his kind of like the head of his departments there. But if we look at the contrast with what Carney's still dealing with a lot of the Trudeau kind of weakness that he had in cabinet, the Chrystia Freelands, the Francois Philippe Champagnes, Melanie Joly, Stephen Guilbeault. You could say Tim Hodgson, good guy, got a record in that, but not enough Tim Hodgsons, too many Freelands, too many Jolys, too many Francois Philippe Champagnes. There's talk of a cabinet shuffle. I mean, I think if he wants to play in the same league, he has to get some serious people too. And then Stephen Harper, they actually called on Stephen Harper, probably the best move they could have ever done. You know what I think they should do is make him the Bank of Canada governor. I doubt if he'd take the job, but that would be the guy for the Bank of Canada.
So Stephen Harper, I had the privilege of going and being chosen as the Canadian delegate to the UN back in 2014 actually, and 2014, 2015. And what I will tell you about Stephen Harper is that he was revered in and amongst the UN. As I had the privilege of meeting with other delegates from other countries, he was someone that was known as a very powerful negotiator, as someone who had done a tremendous amount of trade deals with other countries. I think his total number was 64 different trade deals for Canada outside of the United States. And he was someone that had a tremendous amount of diplomacy, tremendous amount of tact, but knew how to stand up for Canada, knew exactly which way to do it. And because he was really trying to get the oil and gas industries firing on all cylinders, there was a lot of power to Canada back in that time frame. What I've seen over the last 10 years is that we have shrunk back enormously so. And we've been seen as a cowering country or as a very polite country, or as a very kind country, rather than a country that has tenacity and should be feared.
Overly woke, you could say too. And then you pull up this chart here on Pierre Poilievre's chart there, and you just basically, you can see, keep going, there's a chart there, that one there, and there's the 10 years, there's the marker right there, right? When Harper was in government, Canada was envied by most of the world. We were on the right track. We had budget surpluses, and we weathered that 2008 financial crisis better than most people as well. And now we see this large separation away from where the United States is going and where Canada is going.
Yeah, and if you took that chart even farther back to 2008, to where Harper started, I think you'd see Canada making up for lost time and kind of catching up with the U.S. And then basically we've tanked adjacent to our neighbors, and I feel it. I hear around my dinner table the kids talk about, hey, if only we could move somewhere else. And I don't know if you've seen, but on social media right now there are literally recruiters that are saying if it feels like your paychecks aren't going far enough, you're never going to own a house, and it goes through this list of criteria. And I mean, I know that my kids, if they were going through that list, would be like check, 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 and not just my kids in their social circles. If
Yeah.
I should extend it past just them, and what they're saying, and then at the end of these videos, it says, give me a call because we can relocate you and we have jobs waiting for you, and cost of living less expensive, and you can own a house with 25% of your income. And that is scary to me because there are recruiters going after our younger generations and giving them really what they are looking for right now, which is the ability to start out, and ability to move forward. That differential that is on that chart is real, and it is mostly felt by those that are trying to make it in this world and trying to get ahead and trying to make it get a start. I brought it before. Average first-time home buyer in the Metro Toronto area is now 40. I would love to see that statistic for BC, and I bet you it would be very similar. I think it would be probably mid-30s.
There's also a stat out there that some of the best and brightest and professionals are also fleeing to the United States. And we've seen that PBO report that came out a while ago that Carney left off when it said the best and brightest and the ones with means will leave, and the rest will be out there killing all the wildlife just to survive. And they mocked that and said that's not. But many Canadians almost feel that way right now. There's a bunch of stuff on social media that talks about too how, if you're an asylum seeker, they'll put you up in a hotel. And meanwhile, if you have no means in Canada, you're sleeping in a tent on the side of the road, or they don't seem to care about their own citizens first. And it's really getting dystopian for a lot of people.
Well, and that Privy Council report was echoed by the MNP, right? Report that said, people, there's a large number of our population that is hovering on bankruptcy.
3/5 in British Columbia. 3/5 in British Columbia. Yeah.
So this is their reality. And these recruiters are wily in that they're actually saying things like, if you're paying more taxes than you ever have before, but not seeing anything change and not seeing anything get better, here is where you can go instead. And that is mobile. This is not a mystery to us. University of Calgary School of Economics, they have been doing reports on where that threshold is on taxation, where it actually starts diminishing, where a country will earn less on taxation because its population will start to leave. And I saw just recently on social media a gentleman who said, hey, I left Canada, and here's why. I can take my company, and he literally said, I can take my company across the US border, and here is the difference that it makes. And as he was talking, the only thing I could think of is that's exactly what Carney did with Brookfield. It's exactly what he did. He saw exactly the same trajectory and did that same move. So it is a scary thing, and we are in very precarious times right now.
I still don't get that where we have government on vacation, and Carney's getting a discount on a bridge again, and I think there was that park pass, so a couple of coupons here and there, and still no clarity on a pipeline. Because Alberta says yes, let's do it. Ontario says yes, let's do it. Saskatchewan says yes to do it. Manitoba says yeah, not through us. And then and NDP says. So where is this one economy? Where is the magic? And why aren't they not seriously sitting down? Because, again, our biggest asset, Trump's demonstrated this. He's demonstrated it by taking those two deals. That's our biggest asset. That's what we have to sell. If, like David Eby, we're going to talk about later, how he wants to sell windmills. But anybody can start in windmill. We don't have that. That's not ours. You know what I mean? Like, what's in the ground is what is ours. And I hear Tim Hodgson say it's in the ground, but I'm not. He says it in kind of couched words. What he's saying is in the ground is like, what is it, hydrogen he's talking about? I don't know, because hydrogen for most of the people in the world is a non-starter.
No, and what I would do, and not that I'm being asked, but if I was asked, what I would say is that right now we need a federal government who says we are stopping all equalization payments until you agree to these projects. And if you do not agree to these projects, that's okay. We will go around you and we will go through the states to do it. But in doing so, they will become the beneficiaries of these and not you. I think if you held that over some of these provinces' heads, you would find a lot more agreement in very sudden fashion. I think Quebec would be a lot more agreeable to, pipeline projects. I think Manitoba would be a lot more agreeable to pipeline projects. Why? Because they are current recipients of those payments and not givers of those payments. The reality is we need a stronger federal government who does these, energy projects that are going to be beneficial to everyone in Canada. And I remind people, Newfoundland and PEI were some of the biggest labor forces for the natural gas and oil sector in Alberta. There are literally private planes going every single week to and from northern Alberta from those provinces so that those people could find meaningful employment and six-figure jobs. These are amazing paying jobs. These are phenomenal for our economy. They are phenomenal for our First Nations. Mining is the largest employer of First Nations across the country. You want to get, a strong economy and prosperity that is shared. There's no better way to do it than to stoke the fire of our resource sector and literally make things happen. And if we don't, we are going to be left in the dust. I mean, the headlines this last week were on the tariffs that are now on our softwood lumber. I mean, dear God, the BC government has been sleeping at the wheel without getting us a deal. And, some would say, well, you have to have a willing partner in the South. And it's like, I remember Mike de Jong had a deal within, months of taking over that file. And literally the NDP have been sleeping at that same wheel for the last 8 years. And here we are.
Yeah, Mark Carney ran as the deal maker in Canada that could get deals done. And it seems like we can't even get the deal done with the 13 premiers here in Canada. That's the deal that needs to get done first, instead of talking about coupons. And then I was in a former life a mine site controller and also worked at the mills as a youngster. And I can tell you right now, a lot of the people working at the mines and the mills were from Newfoundland, lots of Newfoundlanders and a lot of Northern Ontarians as well that were, out of the mining industry there. And the same thing goes for the mills, lots of Newfoundlanders and stuff like that, we're looking for work across Canada and they're good paying jobs. And at the mine site that I was at, we employed a lot of people from the community, right? Some of the First Nations communities where we're at. That was part of the mandate there, was to make sure that everybody that wanted a job had a job and was trained. And in mining, you have to do a lot of training to go underground. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think we have a lot of work to do. And I don't think, Carney as the deal maker has not proven possible. And, in terms of stoking our economy, it hasn't happened, as you just mentioned. The easiest one is through provinces, and it's not being done. They're telegraphing as of yesterday through the Globe and Mail that there's going to be a new housing entity that is going to suddenly stoke the fires of our housing, building industry. I just don't see it. I don't know how that's going to come to fruition. We don't need another entity. We need powerful entities working on how we're moving forward here. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the fall. The absolute worst thing you could do is the cabinet shuffle right now, because you don't have a deep enough cabinet to do that shuffle, or deep enough caucus, I should say, to do that shuffle. And the other thing is that you're going to just introduce new insecurity and new instability within each of those different areas of focus. And I think that's going to be difficult for all the deputy ministers and bureaucrats that are underneath trying to get their mandates straight.
Yeah, it's quite messy, and it's just I still don't understand why they're on hiatus when Poilievre said that he would have kept everybody working and being hard at it, and then it still makes no sense to me at all. And it's almost at a loss for words why we're not doing things. When we watch Trump there in England or Scotland, and with Keir Starmer there and the media there, basically using him as a mirror for Keir Starmer there, saying, how did he close the border? We talk about immigration problems here. How did he do it? He did it just like that. Why can't you do it? Energy. And even Trump called out Starmer and said, look, you have all this energy out of the ocean there. Why aren't you using it? What's the matter with you? And he called him out on so many things. And the thing is, Same thing you can do here in Canada. Like, you really have, like, you're one of the richest nations in the world, and yet you suppress it on your own. Karina Gold, remember she said we're going to landlock Alberta's resources.
Yeah.
We're dealing with politics of 10 years ago. These things are gone. Like this climate agenda and all this other stuff and this woke politics, it's over. Like, if you look what's happening in the world, it's over. I think the only people still practicing is the NDP and the Liberals.
Yeah, it's over because the people can't afford to live right now.
Yeah.
It's over because people's children have no hope left. It's over because first world countries are being turned into third world countries because they're becoming impoverished without healthcare that will actually allow them to have a long life, without prosperity that actually allows them to be healthy. We are so backwards right now, that people are rising up, and that you're seeing this huge pushback. Why do we still have an immigration issue? Well, because we don't even know where they are. We can't find them. And oh wait, those ones are supposed to go home, but they haven't. Why? Because they're still wandering around. They've just chosen to stay here, and we don't know exactly where they are. And that's bureaucracy, right? We have a very, very defective bureaucratic system that has not effectively controlled immigration, that has not effectively monitored where those individuals have come to, and how they're going to get home, and monitored that they have gone home, and arrested them if they haven't gone home. And we have take exception to what Trump is doing, but the reality is, hey, a lot of people are opting to go back because they don't want to be arrested. They don't want ICE coming for them. And do I think it's the right way? Do I think that it's perfect way? No, but at least when you show force, you know what the terms are. And those people were given lots of notice to say, if you're here illegally, go home, because we are going to get you home if not. And effectively shutting down a border. I remember growing up in Southern California, and as a kid, when we would go through the Mexican border, there were searches of every single vehicle that went through there. I went through just a couple of years ago, before Trump came back into power, and there was, I was like, oh my goodness, the security is nothing today compared to what it used to be. Like, it was like, where are all of the guards? Where are all of the checks and balances? Where are not even, there was nothing. In fact, I don't even know if there's still a fence in play right there in San Diego. So, honestly, I think that it doesn't always look pretty. Are there going to be naysayers? Absolutely. Is it going to be imperfect? For sure. But at least you are standing up for the rights of your citizens, and for those that immigrated correctly. And my adopted sister, she's a Mexican immigrant, but her family did it correctly. And they always were very critical of those that were crossing over illegally, but then still getting all of the same privileges and freedoms that they enjoyed, and even some of the same opportunities. So, hey, if you're going to have a system, then you want people to abide by it, then enforce it. And that right now is what we're lacking here in Canada.
Most serious politicians agree that without borders, there is no nation, really. What's the purpose then? And I think
the job of the federal government. The job of the federal government is to enforce its borders, and to force it in federal borders. So, it's one of the biggest jobs. It's why we have military.
Yeah, we've neglected that as well. We won't get into that, but we've neglected that as well, and that's where Trump derives most of his strength right now. That demonstration in Iran was huge, for that, and then NATO's, most of the European nations neglected their military. Canada, it's even the dumbest kid in the class as far as NATO goes, and and that's what we get for it, right? Because we can't even protect ourselves. We all rely on that military machine of the American military might.
Yeah, and if we are ever under attack, we won't have a choice of becoming the 51st state. Yeah. We will have to literally become the 51st state to protect its citizens. So, I think it's very real. I think that Carney, it's a great move on his part to say we are going to be spending on this, on this front. The unfortunate reality that he's grappling with right now is that we don't have the money to do so, and we have spent ourselves into oblivion. And printing more money is going to be a very dangerous situation in terms of inflation. And we're seeing that because investor dollars are fleeing our businesses because they can see what the future holds.
I think if Carney wants to do something that is a big, bold stroke, I'm going to suggest this to him. I don't know. I know Chrystia Friedland's a friend of the show, but fire Tiff Macklin for what he did. And don't worry about it, Canadians. You go out and get that mortgage. Don't worry about it. We won't raise interest rates in the foreseeable future. Fire Tiff Macklin and put Stephen Harper in as Bank of Canada governor. I guarantee you that investment money will flow back to Canada, and people will look at Canada as a serious country again. Because I mean, he's probably one of the top economists here in Canada, and he knows how to get stuff done. But let's talk about Alberta. Let's talk about Alberta. Alberta, Danielle Premier, she wants that separation question on the referendum, and she's getting a little bit of pushback from the Alberta elections officer, because there's like some red tape in that, and they're saying that, we can't put it on there. We have to see if that's even allowed and all that stuff. They're kind of trying to stall her. What do you think of all that?
Yeah, stall her. It's going to benefit her to have it legitimized and to make sure that it's done correctly. Because the last thing you want to do is put the Albertans through that process and then have it disqualified because it wasn't it was against the Charter of Rights or Freedoms, or it was, not part of the federal elections law. So I do think that there is merit to going slow enough to catch, Elections Alberta up to speed and Elections Canada. But, and I say but, she needs to put that question on a ballot. She needs to once and for all get it silenced. And you look at what happened to Quebec after that referendum went out, and they were able to quell it, and they were able to say we are not separating. This is done. All of a sudden, they were able to focus on what it looks like to be part of Canada, and be a much bigger participant in the Canadian society. I do think that now that's kind of waned. Our memory has gotten a little bit longer, and the Bloc Québécois is back in full force. And I do think that we need to, maybe remind them again that the vast majority of their population does not want to separate, and the vast majority of their population knows that they would go under if they would, if they were to separate. I mean, there was the economist that did the analysis of Alberta and said, well, Albertans would be less rich if they separated. I think, in reading that report and reading what they based that on, I do think it was a little bit short-sighted in that they didn't acknowledge that there would be any new trade agreements or any ability for Alberta to negotiate or navigate on their own. I think that once they were unlocked from Canada, there would be an ability to do that. The other thing they didn't look at was what a sovereign government of Alberta would actually be able to solicit in terms of investment dollars and for its economy, et cetera. So I do think that it was a little bit short-sighted. I think there needed to be a little bit more of a, if this were to happen, this would, look differently and it would look this way. Or if these things were to happen in terms of probabilities and sensitivity analysis, I didn't think was done to the full extent. But having said that, I think she needs to ask and answer this question. And I think the answer is more important than the ask. I don't think she really cares. I don't think she really cares which way Albertans go, but I do think she cares that it gets asked and answered, and it stops being such a kind of a thorn in her side.
The caution for me, I know she wants it as a bargaining chip for sure, but the federal government is like, look, this is our options here, so treat us with respect. But, sometimes you let the genie out of the bottle and it may get you some stuff that you may not want at the end of the day. But I guess it is a question that's not going to go away as well for Albertans. And I think that is, like you say, I think the question now needs to be answered. It's out there. It now needs to be answered one way or the other. And, if they get even, maybe it's even a mild, Quebec had that 51-49, that it gives them more bargaining power. Quebec has all its bargaining. Quebec gets to do almost anything it wants, right? Quebec basically has its own CPP, they do a ton of things that most Canadians don't even realize, right? That they collect their own taxes. Yeah, they collect their own taxes for CRA. They do it, right? Then they give back to the government.
Yeah, and the other thing that Quebec does that I think if most Canadians knew this, they would be really fighting a lot differently and a lot harder, is they actually can have private healthcare.
No, they can do everything, right? Almost
And
everything. Yeah.
private healthcare was taken all the way to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court heard the decision and actually rendered their own decision, which was that Quebecers or Quebecois could actually have their own private healthcare options and opportunities, and so they do so. You have private clinics, you have private surgical centers, you have private hospitals, you have private physicians, and the rest of Canada were denied that opportunity because the Supreme Court decided not to hear Dr. Brian Day's court case and decided not to render a decision.
Yeah, so CPP, they have their own QPP, and then they collect taxes, and then submit to CRA. So you don't pay your taxes directly to the government of Canada. You pay directly to the government of Quebec. And there's a ton of nuances. Like, for anybody that's out there, just go on ChatGPT and say, what benefits does Quebec get that many of the other provinces don't get? And you'll be shocked, actually.
You will be shocked. You will be shocked. And I mean, so is it just a bargaining chip? I don't think so, because I don't think the federal government is the one that needs to be convinced. I think it's the other provinces that need to be convinced. I think the other provinces are the ones that are the holdouts. And I think if the other provinces were all, thumbs up, let's go, I don't think that you would see the federal government holding out. But I do think that right now the federal government hasn't used their trump card. And I don't speak literal trump card, not the Trump government. Yep. But I don't think that they've actually utilized the powers that they do have to enforce the provinces playing nice in the sandbox.
Yeah, I think David Eby and Quebec has held back the prosperity of Canada for the past 10 years, all facilitated by a weak Liberal government as well, or one that's driven by a climate agenda as opposed to what's good economic policy.
Yeah, when Horgan took over, BC was number one or number two for the last 4 years in the country for our economic output. Right now, we are either last or second to last in terms of economic output.
What a stark contrast, eh? What a stark contrast just with politics, right? Just the difference in politics, because I can remember as a youth, it was Alberta and BC. They were kind of, boom years, Alberta, and then BC kind of more consistent kind of thing, but they were two strong provinces across, and Saskatchewan was a little weaker, but Saskatchewan's gotten stronger with, potash and the uranium and the different things like that. But BC and Alberta used to be like 1 and 2, like a 1-2 punch, but, yikes. Pierre Poilievre. That ballot, this ballot protest or whatever, they targeted his ballot. Elections Canada actually came up with a good answer to it, and which is about time. They're just going to have a write-in ballot. So instead of people getting this ballot that's 2 feet long or whatever, you're just going to write the person's name in as long as it's close enough. Because I don't know who's going to spell Pierre's last name right. That'll be I have trouble spelling it.
Yeah, and I mean, I hope that the write-in ballot is the solution. I love that Elections Canada is actually trying to figure out a solution. So I do think that that's good. But I mean, my concern is that people, again, it's just it is a form of voter suppression, right? So
that's crazy.
How what are you supposed to are you supposed to write it on your hand? It's it's going to be tricky. It's going to be difficult, but my hope is that, that this will help in getting the voters out and in making sure that the candidate of their choice wins, because our democracy and our vote is one of the most important foundational aspects. And, Andrew Coyne's new book is basically Canada is not really even a democracy. And it's when he is asked about that, he talks about, well, our voting system is, and, we have a really fair and a very well managed voting system. But, past the voting system, do those elected officials actually do what the constituents want? Is there enough feedback loop, et cetera? And I think to myself, oh my goodness, this group is literally trying against one, because they've done it both times in the same riding, which is Pierre Poilievre's, to make such a point of how they can, manipulate the election rules in their favor, and to really suppress voters out there. That it's very disheartening to see, as especially because it is one of the few tenets of democracy that still exists today.
Yeah, we shared a story yesterday on Holly Doan's Blacklocks there, saying that the federal elections Canada was laughing at BC elections and saying how bad it was, like it was an internal memo, and they were making fun of the comedy of errors with elections BC. And it's just like, and if you look at the comedy of errors they had themselves, it's like, wow, that's a pot calling the kettle black.
It was, but BC elections, this last election, it really, really fumbled, like over and over and over again. And I mean, knowing those leaders at Elections BC and having interacted with them, on different committees that I was on as an MLA, I know that they're very earnest in really trying to protect the election system. But the comedy of errors was gross and very difficult to maintain trust in the general public when there's that many gross errors.
And then you brought up a really good point, though, like, when you talk about democracy, and media plays a really strong role in that. Media is supposed to hold power accountable. And in the U.S., make people say negative things about Trump, but, he'll sit down with, the networks that he doesn't like, and he'll make himself available. So will all his people. They'll go on CNN, they'll go on, even if they get blasted, they'll go on MSNBC, and they'll do all that stuff. Same thing in England. Me and Ian talked about it today. There's a new network there, kind of a right-leaning network, kind of like their Fox News GB network, which did a really good job in those press conferences there. And but here in Canada, most of the media is funded by the government, and you can't even get it. They won't let Ian, and Ian's applied to be part of the parliamentary, the gallery there. We can't even get in there to ask questions, and we've seen Carney block access. We've seen Trudeau block access to different reporters. They won't. I mean, how many times have I reached out to the NDP here to do interviews? And it's almost impossible. They won't even respond. We've asked Stephen Guilbeault, must be 8 times for an interview on Bill C-18, and not even go whatever yourself. Nothing. So how can we have a strong democracy where the NDP and the Liberals won't even allow themselves to be held accountable?
Yeah, and I almost think, I mean, you and I have talked about this before, the role of media and holding accountable. You're so right. I mean, it's those investigative journalists of the past that have really exposed some of the biggest, drama within political systems in the past, whether it's like Watergate or whether it's like, Bill Clinton's infidelity, et cetera. So there's definitely a huge role for government or for media to play. I almost think, though, that there should be an anonymous registry that media outlets can say, I asked this person and they said no. I asked this person and they said no. And then there should be statistics, right, of how many times these individuals denied having a press interview. Because you're right. I mean, I saw a recent statistic on Trump that said he had done in the first 6 months more media interviews than any other president in their entire duration of presidency. That's insanity.
I would say he does more in one day than Biden probably did in 4 years.
Yeah, and I mean, there's something to it. Like, it's hard to pick out one thing that he says, like, and make it, make a big point about it, because he says so much that it's like, well, which one are you going to? It's like flooding the market, right? He just floods the market with all that he's saying. That it's like, which is it actually true, and what should we?
I think one of the really strong things that he does that I wish we would do in Canada is he opens up the meetings with foreign officials. Like, he allows the reporters into the room, whether he likes them or not. CNN's in there, Caitlin Collins is in there, and he'll have Zelensky sitting there, he'll have whoever's sitting there, and the reporters can ask questions. Like, he'll have his meeting. He even has it at his dinners, his cabinet meetings. Like, when have you ever seen in a Biden administration reporters in a cabinet meeting?
Yeah, and it's true. This is unprecedented, and it is introducing a new level of transparency. It's introducing a new access for for different reporters. Now, I will say that the White House has done a little bit of, like, unless you say that certain things, unless you said the Gulf of America instead of the Gulf of Mexico, you're not allowed in. So they did have some arbitrary rules that they kind of imposed, but it's nothing like the restrictions that the press galleries are done.
It's an old boys club. Even the media doesn't defend the media. The media, the compromised media, will actually keep out the independent media outlets. Like,
Absolutely. And
what
then
is wrong with that? Like, there's something wrong with that.
like when I was in MLA, we actually celebrated, and I won't say which ones, and I won't say, but we would celebrate like the 40th anniversary of a certain reporter in the press gallery, or
Wow.
a 20th anniversary of a certain reporter in the press gallery. And we'd have these like little mini parties with all of the MLAs and all the staff. And I'm sitting there looking at this, and all the communication staff would be there. And I'm like looking at this going, oh my chicken, this is ridiculous. Like
Yeah.
there are only 10 of them that are allowed up in this little tiny balcony section, and they hang their heads over top so they can watch what's happening
Yeah.
outside of the cameras, because that's part of what the appeal is of being actually physically present, is that
Yeah.
you can see all the dynamics that are happening when the camera's not on these independent individuals.
Yeah.
You can actually hear things that are being shouted across, across the aisle when the microphones are not on those individuals. And there's some really, really interesting, powerful dynamics. You can also see what happens when like a House leader turns around and starts chastising some of their, caucus members. So you can see a lot better what's going on, and where things are at, and get a better read on it. So to keep, certain ones out and certain ones in, I think as long as it's a legitimate outlet and they have, a voice, they should be allowed into that gallery, and they should be allowed at those press conferences, and they should be allowed to ask questions, and they should not be monitored to the same extent. What I don't understand is why the public is not more insistent. Like, I don't understand why the public is saying, wait a second, why doesn't my media outlet get interviews? Why doesn't,
Yeah.
you know, the.
Well, they count on it. That's what politicians count on it. That Canadians are apathetic to it. They're just like, they count on that. And here's what this is the Canadian press too, as well as all the other ones. This Christian singer comes in, and he's become famous in Canada because obviously the left-leaning media here in Canada, the compromised media, has branded him MAGA. And because I guess he sang for Trump once, and then so this is they actually went after him, and like wanted his permit. A CBC reporter asked, "Where's your permit to perform in a church?" And he's just like, "What? What do I need a permit for?" And it's just ridiculous. And he's had a bunch of things canceled. He's coming to Kelowna as well.
Yeah, and we're talking about a Christian singer.
Yeah.
I think we need to pause right there and think, what is going on that our media are now branding a Christian singer who may have sung at a Trump event?
Yeah.
So what? Trump is the president of the United States. And if you said about any other singer, this is a singer that has sung for the president's whatever, inauguration, state dinner, event, whatever, that should be lauded. And
Yeah.
instead, we have placed a judgment. We have tried to cancel and really affected religious rights, which are charter rights, right? Like, we actually hold those pretty dear. And at the same time, we can have prayers that will literally hold all of Toronto hostage in terms of their freeway system, and that somehow has to be allowed. But we can't allow a singer to sing inside of a church, like, or in a public space, for a gathering, a religious gathering. Does not make any sense to me. And if you listen to his songs, we're talking about love, peace, joy, and like happiness. Like, we're not talking about
Jesus.
Jesus. Like, we're talking about like really
Yeah.
positive aspects
Yeah.
to religious
Well,
freedoms.
I can tell you right now, we're getting letters, emails into us even saying that they want names of counselors that would allow this. They want names of the organizations that would allow it. There's this obviously this screaming left that just is extreme, that democracy is okay as long as they agree with, you agree with their form of democracy, but allowing freedom of speech, obviously not part of, like some of the people on the far left. And this makes no sense. But I think the media outlets really show their bias and them being compromised for them to put labels on this, like they did during COVID, anti-vax, whatever. These are labels of hate. These are the same people that tell you that you shouldn't label people, but that's what they do right here. When they put a label on MAGA singers' rights violated, what is that supposed to mean?
Yeah, and one of the issues, or one of the exceptions that I make to even some of the aspects of that far left language is that it is very divisive. It tears individuals apart. It gives everyone a label. Everyone had, like, I remember being told that I wasn't allowed to speak for women or for women's rights any further because I did not face intersectional discrimination. And it was like, okay, so because I'm white, I am not allowed to actually speak on behalf of, or fight for, or advocate for, women's rights. And I just take exception to that. It's like, no, actually, we need to focus on what unifies us a lot more than what divides us. And that is not what I see happening right now. That is not what this is right now. And I think it's a very dangerous place for us to be. It's a very dangerous place for us to start labeling and to start, trying to cancel individuals. And, you and I've had that conversation about the one tweet that I made that literally I have never experienced such a pouring of emails and text messages and every one of my accounts. I literally had to just step off of and have staff handle because the flood was inordinate. And it was over at one tweet where I said, we lose. Democracy is the loser when we don't allow all of the voices at the table. Yeah. And that was all I said. It was just to say, hey, look, if you try and silence these voices, you no longer have democracy. And oh my goodness, the flood of
you should have just sent a link to the dictionary and said that, check out the definition there. And then, after you get back to me on that, then we can talk some more. We're going to try and get through these last few ones real quick here. That's okay. You talked about this earlier. We'll just put up the image. 604 nationals with criminal records due to be deported, missing.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
And then
number one, I'm not surprised that we have foreign nationals with criminal records in our midst. I think that we were way too lackadaisical about how we allowed people in. We did not do the thorough checks. This whole aspects of asylum seekers and you can come without any of your records and we don't care who you are, absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that we can't find them now, oh dear God, we let a criminal in and now a criminal doesn't want to be found. Oh, I wonder why. Like, this is horrifying because there's new criminals in our midst, and we are really, really should be much more upset about this than we are.
Rob Shaw put this one up. More than 10 doctors now on that BC's Rare Drug Committee have resigned after, Josie Osborne gave those medications back to the 10-year-old. And that really speaks to what some of these people and politicians, even people, I guess, think of what British Columbians want. I mean, this is very, they don't hear what, I don't understand it. It just doesn't make any sense.
Can you put the tweet back up? I want you to focus on the next sentence. What a spectacularly delusional misreading of how and why the public lost confidence in the system.
Exactly.
I think that that's the most important part of that. It's like you have such a bloated and overinflated view of your opinion and of the system that allowed you to make a decision that, literally 10 specialists in this area disagreed with. You've made a wrong call and there's no checks and balances other than government. And so they decided to use that checks and balances, and then you quit because you're pouting basically, or you quit because you know what? You should quit because you thought of yourself as something.
You should have never been there in the first place, in my opinion. You know what I mean? If you thought you were God, because that's what you're deciding, whether this child lives or dies and what day she dies. Like, if you thought you were God and you were mad because 13 other experts from the United States that came and said that you were wrong, then all of a sudden you decided that you're not playing anymore. Why not just say sorry, right? Yeah. I mean, maybe I was wrong. Maybe.
Or say the system worked. The system worked because we came to the correct conclusion in the end, right? And we need to listen to these checks and balances. And we're so happy that others spoke up. Like, rather than saying it just shows a lack of humility and a lack of understanding. And Rob Shaw God bless that man. He is so sharp, and he'll call it like he sees it on whatever side of the fence. It doesn't matter. And I'm just really, really pleased to see that he's calling out what he's seeing right now.
And I was going to play this clip, but in the interest of time, we won't. Adrian Dix there, he says they were doubling down on clean power, expanding our grid, working in partnership with First Nations, and all the while securing clean electricity. And they, this has to do with AB's comments too of, Donald Trump slammed windmills and then, said that he doesn't like windmills because it kills eagles and all that stuff. And then EB turned it into that he just doesn't like him on his golf course and stuff like that. But
no.
I think what Trump is saying, he wants the energy that's beneath our feet that's there. And like we're focusing. So EB has invited, everybody to come and build windmills here in British Columbia.
Yeah, I want to remind all of those that listen. Number one, EB and the NDP government, and actually previous to him, Horgan, shut down all of the IPP projects that were in queue back when the BC Liberals were in power. They did that as one of their first things that they ever did, saying that Site C was more than enough and that they were going to have more than enough. The whistleblowers that have come out of, whether it was the BCUC or the Utilities Commission or BC Hydro, have long said we don't have enough power to meet the electrification goals of this province. We don't have enough power to meet the population growth of this province. We don't need Site C, we need D, E, F, G, and H, and so this is a made in BC problem over the past 10 years of government, and I can't emphasize that enough. Now, you talk to any engineer, and they will say there are always trade-offs. And yes, you can have amazing solar, but if it is over the earth, that earth becomes dead underneath it. It just simply strips all of the natural nutrients out of the earth, and it stands to reason, right? These solar panels are pulling all of the energy that the sun is giving and would normally go into the earth for nutrients, etc., and it's taking it and redeploying it. So that's a trade-off, right? Yes, wind turbines are amazing for a natural electricity, but they do kill birds, and whales don't necessarily like them. So, there's always trade-offs, and it's not an either or statement, it's an and statement. And what I would love to see from the government is let's fire on all cylinders and actually look at the LNG that we are already using electricity made from LNG. Thank you, Alberta, because we already import about 25% of our electricity and have done so through the duration of this first 6 months of this calendar year. So we are already getting oil, LNG and coal burned electricity. We just don't have to count it in our emissions because it is created in Washington and Alberta. And so we get to still say that we're super clean and our hydro is super amazing.
And Harman Bangu there had a rebuttal there. We're going to play this clip from Landman, but we won't. But and if you can put that up there. David Eby says BC will be the engine of Canada's new economy. Powering it with windmills and solar panels, wishful thinking. Clean energy isn't about powering it except government subsidies and inflated egos. And if you're a U.S. producer, change the handouts. Sure, come on to BC. There you go. The one thing that those two LNG deals are super important to what's going on. What happened with Trump there? You can take that down. With what happened with Trump in both Japan and in Europe, those two deals should have been our deals. They were actually crying when they came here, begging for it, and we sold them hydrogen. We sold them an MOU on hydrogen. And most automakers have given up their dreams for hydrogen. You can pull up the Ballot stock chart and take a look at it. I invested in Ballot a long time ago. Hydrogen, is basically a storage device. It's a battery, really, right? Because you take energy, whether that's from windmills or solar or from LNG or from coal or whatever, and you store it in the form of hydrogen. But it's such inefficient, though. I mean, it loses. I think it's half of it when you convert it, and it still has this explosive quality to it. And most places have kind of given up on hydrogen. So, and then I guess the second question would be that if we sold the MOU, we sold hydrogen to the Europeans, why did they buy LNG from Trump? That doesn't make any sense, does it? They should
Yeah.
be waiting for the hydrogen, right?
Yeah, and I've heard that same excuse. Nobody wants it anymore. There is no market for it. Apparently, there's a 1.75 trillion dollar market for it because Japan and the EU have just made these deals. So
Nobody
I think
told them, I guess, that there's hydrogen on the way.
yeah. So I mean, there is lots of we are going to need so many forms of energy. That's why it's not either or, it's and. That's why we have to be firing on all cylinders. We have to be creating energy. The prosperity of any country is dependent on the lowest cost energy it can provide its population with. So, if we want a more prosperous Canada, we have to provide low cost energy. While we're creating that prosperity, let's really innovate and let's look at all of the renewables and all the other ways that we can have energy that lasts in perpetuity and lower our carbon footprint, etc. But dear God, let's not cut off our nose to spite our faces.
Energy is everything. We've said that a zillion times on this show. Eleanor Sturko, she's saying that she's glad to see that safe supply no longer be federally funded after that funding runs out. And she was on that. I mean, she's been on that forever. And congrats to her for sticking on that. But she wants them to quit now, right?
I would say that there is not another single MLA that you could credit with a more dramatic positive change in BC, not on government side or opposition side. So when people say opposition MLAs can't do anything, I will bring up Eleanor Sturko and say, you can if you are amazing at your portfolio, if you understand it, if you are meeting with people, if you are getting the information and getting whistleblowers to come to you, you can absolutely impact change and powerful change. And nobody has done more than Eleanor Sturko in that particular way. And I would challenge anyone who is listening to this, please text me, email me, tell me if you have another MLA who has more positively affected change for BCers.
And then we'll end with a message to the federal government to get rid of that EV mandate before there's no auto sector to protect here in Canada. And this is Andrew Scheer putting that out here. I think Dan McTeague, former Liberal cabinet minister, is also starting a petition on. I don't know why they need a petition. It doesn't make any sense to me. Again, you and I both drive electric vehicles, but we also know that this is not a workable solution for most of Canada. And
no. And I brought this up. When I was in debate on the EV changes that were made on the bill against Josie Osborne, actually, and so she and I went head to head, and I actually showed how much EVs cost, how the subsidies were just a drop in the bucket, how much more expensive they were than gas powered, and she kept bringing up the Nissan Leaf to me, and I said not everyone can fit a Leaf. You can't fit a family of 5 in a Leaf. You can't fit soccer, or hockey gear, or even your school lunches and backpacks in a Nissan Leaf. So, I really brought up to her that you're hitting the hardest hit, that those would be most affected were those that did not have an alternative. And we are seeing that in live and real time. It's not just the federal government. I would call on the federal government to remove the EV mandate, and I would desperately call on the NDP to follow suit and to drop it. Let the market dictate it. Let them figure out how innovation is going to proceed. And that is coming from someone who drives an electric vehicle. So I am someone who says, I would not take my EV across the Coquihalla in the middle of a snowstorm, but I would take my husband's F-150. And the reason is I would take his F-150 because I know that if I was stuck on the side of the road, I could actually get gasoline delivered to me, whereas I'm not going to get my battery charged in the same way. And I know that if it was caught in the middle of a snowstorm, it would perform in a better way. So I'm a strong believer in it. We need more infrastructure. We need more electricity. The cost of electricity is going to go up. I could start talking ad nauseum because I love this file. I love this part of the mandate that I had in terms of the environment and in terms of energy. And I could go head to head with anyone who tells me that EVs are less expensive. They simply are not yet.
I would say to people, if they're so good, you shouldn't have to force somebody to do it. They should willingly want to do it. So just let people choose. I mean, that is kind of what a democracy is, right? Do you know what I mean? This. Right. And it's an ideology that's kind of failing. We hardly hear it anymore in the news. You surely don't hear it in the U.S. anymore. Do you know what I mean? because it was like climate change, and all of a sudden, even Carney doesn't really talk about it. Nobody really talks about it anymore, other than David Eby.
The latest I saw was that only 4% of Canadians believe that climate change is their number one issue. Like that is a minute amount. Right now, they're trying to feed their families and.
Right. But you can't put a roof over your head, and you can't put groceries on the table. Those are the number 1 and 2. Dinner or the dining table issues or the kitchen table issues, as they say it, are the issues that are really driving Canadians around. How do I put gas in my car to get my kids to soccer? How do I put food in the fridge that I can actually eat meat? And then how do I like pay for rent, or you know what I mean, like how and then dream about buying your own home, or maybe going on a vacation or something. Those are things that British Columbians have been putting off. And I did that interview with MNP, and they said British Columbians, especially British Columbians, are putting their lives on hold because they just can't afford luxury things like a vacation, or like even meat. For that matter, they've maxed out their credit cards buying groceries.
Totally. And you talk to a senior who is in poverty. And we have seniors that are in their 70s trying to take care of parents that are in their 90s. And, their kids are in their 50s. And literally there's just no capacity, and no capacity financially, no capacity with time, and everyone's just trying to survive. And I could tell you horror stories of people who are literally on the razor's edge. And this is not unique. This is not who you would think it is. This is not your everyday person. So dear God, why are we then telling them they must buy an EV? That just makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, I'm going to say let's put the dynamic duo back together. Us, we're the dynamic duo, but also let's put the dynamic duo of Carney and Harper back together, and they can just switch roles, right? Just trading places. So Carney or Harper can now work for Carney, and they can get things done. I guarantee that would probably be Carney's best move. If he does that,
we could probably see which of them was actually better, right? Which of them was actually
and which one will get stuff done? I mean, I would start doling out the money for him right now to be an advisor, because didn't Trudeau hire Carney as an advisor?
Yeah, he sure did.
There you go. I don't know if you'd be able to pry him away from Daniel Smith, because he's running the Sovereign Wealth Fund in Alberta right now. So
he is.
They're the only ones that have one, by the way. Anyway,
is amazing. I have to say, I have a tremendous amount of respect for him and his capacity as an economist, as well as one of our prime ministers, and how he is impacting change now is really remarkable and very admirable.
And we had about 10,000 views on our last show, and hopefully if you get spread this out, share it with people. And we even got a tip last time. You can actually, it was great, but the biggest tip you could give us is actually share this and comment and spread the word. And we appreciate all the viewers on Now Media, and appreciate Renee's time as usual. A great show as always, and we'll see you back next week.
See you then.
All right. Thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news, we live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence.